Hello everyone, my name is Abigail, and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to London Build Online. I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors, with special mention of CPJ Group, our sponsor of today's session. Today's session will kickstart with a presentation by Paul Burns at CPJ Group, followed by a panel discussion on bridging the skills gap and future-proofing construction, moderated by Paul and joined by our fantastic lineup of panelists. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A throughout the session, so do take the opportunity to submit any questions you have in the Q&A box on your screen. I hope you all enjoyed today's session, and I'd like to hand over to you now, Paul. Oh, hi there, have we got Paul online with us now?
Sorry,
Sounds like
I got to unmute myself.
Yeah, Paul, are you there?
Hello, Abigail.
Fantastic.
Hi. Good morning. Thanks for attending. As Abigail said, we've got a very distinguished panel looking at different angles of the skills gap, how it can be resolved, and how in so doing we can future-proof the industry. As Abigail also mentioned, we want to keep this as flexible and as open as possible, so you get as much out of the webinar as you hope. And to that effect, questions will be answered regularly at the end of every couple of slides, rather than go through them all and hope you remember all the information. The slides will be circulated after the webinar in partnership with Oliver Kinross. So I would just like to introduce the panel and go around in the order in which they appear on the screen. So if I'm Paul Burns, I'm the Operations Manager at the CPJ Group. We're working with a number of contractors across the country, particularly focusing on the skills gap in the civil engineering and infrastructure sectors. And we are now, I've got a national partnership for Kickstart, which makes the process a lot easier to guarantee the same standard of provision across the country. Working very closely with the next panellist, Jacqueline Noon, who will now introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Noon. I'm Social Value Manager for United Living Property Services. United Living is a major contractor that specialises in social housing, new homes, utilities and property services.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Nigel.
Hi everyone, my name is Nigel Ostime. I'm a partner at Hawkins Brown Architects. We're a practice of just under 300 people with studios in London, Manchester, Edinburgh and the US. We work across a broad range of sectors, primarily residential, which is about a third of our work, and education, which is another third, alongside workplace, healthcare, culture, civic community and transport infrastructure, where, for example, we're delivering 3 of the central London Crossrail stations. We also have studios for interior design and urban planning. We're very much a design-led practice, but we always want to build out our projects, and we've invested heavily in project delivery skills. Part of that was setting up what we call the specialist design studio that I co-lead, which provides support to the project teams in matters like technical design, BIM, and computational design, as well as sustainability, CDM and DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly. DFMA and MMC, modern methods of construction, are areas I'm particularly interested in and that we as a practice are keen to promote. And DFMA can be a route to bridging the skills gap, and I think we're going to pick up on that later.
Thanks, Nigel. Hello, Christina.
Hello, good morning everyone. I'm Christina Scant. I'm the Group HR Manager for Amberon and associated companies. We are primarily traffic management providers across England and Wales, and I head up the HR team here.
Thanks, Christina. Amanda.
Hi everybody, I'm Amanda Winder. I'm a learning development social value consultant running Strive Development. Working particularly in the construction sector, I feel very passionate about promoting the wide breadth of careers in construction and helping young people and others into the construction sector and seeing them progress throughout. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, as I said at the start, just in terms of housekeeping, please send in any questions at any time and we'll answer them after group discussions, and we'll circulate all relevant information to support any questions that we don't have time to answer during this session. So, without further ado, the 5 main topics we decided to cover are how to attract people into the industry, how to train and upskill people when they're in the industry. Nigel's going to concentrate on off-site, the growth of off-site construction and how that creates a whole new range of skills to be generated. How we retain people in the industry, and then an open question and answer session. But please, as I say, type in any questions as any issues come to mind. So, in terms of attracting people, we decided there was 3 key themes. How do we get people in? What's the problems we're facing? And how do we overcome these problems? Christina and I are working on a project, so Christina, we maybe want to start off with that one. How do we get people into the industry? Then Jackie and Amanda could hopefully come in.
I should have known you'd come to me first, Paul. Yeah, we are fortunate that we're a rapidly growing business, particularly in the current climate, and we have a skills gap. It's a problem that we're currently facing as an organisation, and we really need to push on getting people into our industry, training them up as quick as possible, enough relevant experience, keeping them safe, and then keeping them. A big thing for us on attracting people and the right people has been about having a proper structure to the training that leads into a real career path. And as Paul said, we've been working quite closely on work trials, kickstart schemes. We would love to have an apprenticeship, which we'll probably come on to on a couple of slides' time. But those sort of structured training programs, people are looking for that at the moment. They want the security and the stability that the employer is going to invest in them, and that it's not a dead-end job. There is a career and a very clearly defined career path as well.
Thanks, Christina. Jacqueline.
I think in terms of attracting people, we've all got a responsibility to positively promote the industry. For a long time now, it's not an industry that necessarily attracts young people. They see it purely as outdoor work, and not everyone wants to work outdoors. And I think they need to be aware of the multitude of roles that are within construction. And that takes time from us, and we need to be prepared to commit that resource into going into schools and colleges and positively promoting construction as a career choice.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Amanda.
Yes, I'd echo what Jackie and Christina have said, but also I think it's following on from what Jackie said, it's changing the public perception of construction, that it isn't just the trade roles, there's a whole host of other engineering, technical, professional roles, including architecture out there, and having role models. So one of the things that I've been involved in recently is developing female role models, so getting them to be willing to talk about their journey and promote how they started in the industry sector and have developed through. So I think it's having people a wide diverse mix, so including greater diversity in race as well as gender and so on. So having those role models that are BAME or female, or so that people can associate themselves with them, that they look like them and aren't just white men.
Thanks. Nigel.
Yeah, okay, so I think there are two sort of separate things in a way here. We're talking about working outdoors, so that's probably more the contracting side of it, and then there's the consultant side of it that I'm coming from, really. I mean, on the contractor side, there is a bit of a demographic situation where we have got this shortage of young people coming in to construction, and perhaps put off by the fact that, you know, it's considered to be working on a muddy building site. So, you know, one way that we can get around that is to try and build more of our buildings in factories, into a you know, a sort of indoor environment, where in fact we don't have the same skills needs, so we can get a sort of more diverse workforce. So I think that's one side. On the consultant side, I think it's a slightly different issue. I mean, certainly speaking for my profession, for architects, there's actually no shortage of young people wanting to study architecture. So that's not an issue, but there is a big drop off from people starting to study who actually end up qualifying. And I think part of that is, I mean, that's always been the case to some extent, but a big part of that is no doubt about the cost of it, because the course is 5 years of university plus 2 years of working in an office before you can take your professional qualifications. So these days, with university fees, that's at least £50,000 of cost just to study and get through the university, plus obviously the living cost on top of that. So you can imagine that's a significant issue. And you know, so it's becoming an occupation that really only people who come from a well-off background can get into, and we really need to do something to improve that, to get some reasonable level of diversity into the profession, as well as addressing issues like gender pay gap and so on. One way that we can do that is through having apprenticeship schemes. There is an apprenticeship scheme in architecture which started a couple of years ago, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of training, and that's one way that we might look to broaden things out. But we need a lot more investment in that, and there are difficulties itself from a commercial point of view for practices to support apprentices. But yeah, there are issues both on, you know, from a contractor side and a consulting side. They're different things, but they're both issues that we really need to address.
Thanks, Nigel. As I mentioned at the beginning, in terms of overcoming these problems, there's now, for the first time in over 20 years, a national pot of funding available from the Job Centre. It's very easy to access. It was announced by the Chancellor, and now it's starting to become operational, as Christina referred to. She's about to make her first application to the Kickstart Fund. And the discussions we've had at all levels of the industry, tier 1 to subcontractors on water contracts with maybe 15 to 20 people, they all want to participate in it. And there's a maximum of I think it's 250,000 placements available on Kickstart, where they get a wage subsidy for 6 months to the tune of £250 a week. Their training's front loaded. And in the webinar I was on last week about Kickstart, there's only 27,000 people on it at the present. So the government have identified infrastructure as a key sector to absorb a lot of these placements. And I think it does provide a really excellent opportunity on a national basis to do everything that the panelists mentioned, get more role models in from underrepresented groups, make them aware of the wide range of jobs, from Christina's sector to everything that goes on inside the traffic cones, be that 5G broadband, water, gas. Nigel mentioned off-site. We're in discussions with a modular housing manufacturer about their Kickstart programme. So it just seems the timing's great, because again, during the week, the government also announced the National Infrastructure Bank been set up, and the wide range of people around the panel are coming from different parts of the industry, but I think this is a common pot of money we can all access together to make sure we can start to overcome these problems. Christina, you mentioned coming in, you know, showing a formal apprenticeship route. What difficulties have you had so far in getting an apprenticeship recognised for traffic management?
So we've tried a few different times really to get an apprenticeship up and running specifically for traffic management, with no success thus far. And I know that several other traffic management specific businesses have attempted the same, which is, it's frustrating because, you know, we are levy payers, and you know, we have that available to us, but we can't access a scheme for our sector. And the traffic management training lends itself to an apprenticeship because there is a structured training programme in place naturally through the Lantry scheme, and you know, there's a level of experience and sort of time service that needs to be done between those qualifications, so it lends itself perfectly to an apprenticeship. But we can't seem to get one off the ground, and it's incredibly frustrating. But I would like to hope that, obviously we're going to keep trying. I would like to hope that in time that we would be able to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, we can pick up that Trailblazer discussions next week as well, Christina. Amanda, how do you think some of these issues you mentioned, obviously there's a lot of common themes that you and Jacqueline raised, and again that's very representative of the discussions we're having across the country. Again, I mentioned Kickstart as one pot of funding, but I think it can lead on to a wider learning and development framework that can be put in place after that 6 months period elapses, and that would then allow companies like Christina, Jacqueline, supply chain to, you know, engage in the formal training that they haven't been able to do so far. And we're promoting Kickstart as the first 6 months of their working life, not a 6-month training programme. Again, just to change the tone of the conversation, you know. So do you think we're in a position to overcome these problems, or it is what it is and we just have to muddy through as we've done for the last 20 years?
No, I think we need to overcome the problems if the industry is to survive. We need to do things differently, and I think it's not just training people for the sake of training, having the jobs at the end of it. So identifying the jobs before you put them through the training, and enabling people to see the progression routes, that you can start off maybe as a labourer, but then you could develop into civil engineering qualified person, or, you know, a trades person, and then the progression routes beyond that, that there are good progression routes, there are good opportunities to earn good money. And I think it's those key messages that we need to get out, and going back to the role models, or seeing people that have maybe come from disadvantaged backgrounds, maybe young offenders, whatever, and how they've then got into the industry and how they've progressed. So identifying that. But yeah, certainly I think we can do it if we work together collaboratively. COVID has shown that the construction sector can work together collaboratively, and I think this is an opportunity for us to work more collaboratively in regards to training and attracting new people and keeping them in the sector.
Thanks very much. Jacqueline?
I agree with Amanda. I think the collaboration is really important, because having jobs at the end, not everybody will have 10 to 12 jobs for all candidates that are attending a training programme. And so often there will be 12 to 15 candidates and maybe only one job at the end. So to collaborate and to run courses where more contractors are getting together and there's an offer of more jobs at the end is much more worthwhile, and you know, it uses the funding more wisely. So I think collaboration has to be the way. I think with COVID now, there are going to be people of all ages that are looking to retrain, and I know we often focus on the young people, but there, you know, there are going to be lots and lots of people who are looking for work and who will definitely have transferable skills. They just need a small bit of training into the specific role they're going into. And sometimes training courses are just too long. They take a long time, and that puts people off as well. How we can reduce that, I'm not too sure, because obviously there's elements to cover. But I think, you know, if somebody feels they've got to spend 4 years at uni, it's a long time and it's a long commitment. So being able to be at work and have the apprenticeship program, that has to be the best route for people, because they're learning on the job, they're being moulded by the industry, and you know, then they are able to earn a living at the same time.
Brilliant. Thank you. Nigel, you referenced the new apprenticeship programme for architects, and also there's one for architect technologists. What do you see the problems being in terms of rolling that out to an agreed percentage of the intake to the industry?
Well, I think the problem, Paul, is it's probably the commitment that the architectural practice needs to make to do that, because it's not you have to commit to taking on the apprentice for the full course. And when times are potentially choppy, like we might be coming up to next year, you know, potential recessionary times, it's a big commitment for a practice to make. But having said that, it's absolutely one of the really good solutions to this, because you know, another issue which I was going to mention about skills gap is that over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades, I think architects in particular have slightly de-skilled in the sort of technical delivery end of projects, largely because the predominant form of procurement is design and build, where the contractor will be responsible through their subcontractors for delivering a detailed design of a considerable part of the building. So the architect will get planning permission and will develop the employer's requirements, but then doesn't necessarily take that through to the sort of fine detailed design. And in fact, you know, to be honest, contractors often don't really want the architect to come on site, because, you know, we're looking out at sort of quality issues which they maybe would prefer are not brought up for commercial reasons. So I think well, yeah, shocking. So really, the apprenticeship scheme is great because it's embedding practical skills as you go along through the course. It means it's not quite as academic as it might be if you're just spending 5 years in a university environment, but you're actually working in a practice and learning those really important sort of day-to-day skills that you need for managing projects at the same time. So there's definitely a way that we can improve that, other than the fact that it's also less expensive, because the practice is picking up a good amount of the cost. And as I say, this is something we really need to tackle, particularly for a course. I mean, you know, we were saying, you know, what Jackie was saying, what about courses that might be 4 years long? Well, as I say, architecture is a 3-year degree, and then subsequently a 2-year postgrad, and then it's 2 years on top of that before you can take your professional exams. It's a heck of a long time, and that's all very well for people that can afford to do it, but for most people who can't, it's a real barrier. And the apprenticeship scheme massively helps to break that barrier down. So we should be encouraging this, and we should be finding ways of probably making it less of a commercial burden for practices. Perhaps there could be, you know, sort of consideration about how that is undertaken, perhaps some sort of grant funding or whatever. But certainly it's a good thing, and it should be encouraged.
Fantastic, thank you all. Got some interesting points raised in that one. Again, just to the audience, any questions, please use the function on your screen, and we'll pause and put them around the panel as they come in. Moving on. Yeah, just to tie in with a few of the things that the panel mentioned, the different requirements for different parts of the industry. In consultation with a range of contractors, we've got over 40 pathways into the built environment now, and that keeps changing as legislation and compliances keep changing for different sectors, and the fragmentation of the card system you know, means that you need different tickets for demolition than you do for scaffolding or any other one that's its own card-based competencies. And this is again where procurers of public funding have to be aware that there isn't a generic course to get people into the industry. You have to be aware of the specialism that Christina's sector has, that Jacqueline's supply chain have. And you get that part right, everything else can fall into place a lot easier. Put your NVQ structure in place to make sure they get them fully qualified after they join the industry. Employer involvement came up in a number of the panelists' comments there. That's crucial. I don't think anything should be funded without employer involvement. I think for candidates as well, the quicker they see an employer, the more engaged they become. We're just finishing a project with one of Christina's depots, and the initial selection took place at the depot. So right from the outset, the candidates knew there was a serious job opportunity for them, and that's generally reflected in the completion rates. Again, moving on to contractors, ideally you want the big procurers of construction, Network Rail, National Highways, NHS, to start putting stipulations on the supply chain to make sure there's a guaranteed set of pathways into the industry. The funding's there. I mentioned Kickstart, but there's another one coming on for the age group Jackie referred to, the over 25s. Again, we get people who have been made redundant. Some of the candidates we've seen for the job centre in the south of England, people who've been in Gatwick for 30 years as health and safety managers, air cabin crew, travel agents, just sectors that are going to take a while to recover if they do recover, and they're looking to come into an industry where they can start to earn a reasonable living. The big contracts that were announced as a result of the spending review, the levelling up in the north of England, the 5G broadband, the water frameworks, etc. Need a lot of labour, and the money's there for it. And then just again, if the funding standardised as it is with Kickstart, you can really start to get a lot of positive case studies very quickly to just keep the number of people coming into the industry consistent. So on to the second theme about training and upskilling. We identified 4 key questions. What type of training is available? Is it effective? What's the problems with training? And again, we want this to be a discussion about how we can overcome problems, not just a list of statistics about the number of people coming up to retirement age in a certain time scale, or this. Those statistics are easy to come by. We want people to leave here thinking, well, there's a way we can address this by the collaborative approach. Before I go to the panel, there's overcapacity for certain types of construction training and practically zero for ones that are in a period of growth, like Christina's sector, just as one example. The length of the training as well, it's all funding related. So getting qualifications without site experience disillusions young people, because they come out of a course thinking they're a bricklayer or a plumber or an electrician. They're now on a site, they don't have any industry competence cards, and that makes it harder to re-engage them. So if we get that mix of training with the employers on board for the start, as well as Christina's sector, we just agreeing the content of an entry-level course to work on Thames Water, Yorkshire Water, Scottish Water, and yesterday we had another conversation around doing the same with the gas networks. Very intensive courses, fundable through Kickstart, employer-led, competence tickets to start with, and at the end of the 6 months they'll enrol for their NVQ. The uptake from contractors has been huge already, and that's without any formal marketing. So we know there's a desire in the industry to train if it's accessible. It's when it becomes overly bureaucratic and kind of instructed to them. You must send this worker to this place on such and such a date to do this. That's when the barriers come up. And I think we need to look at the whole map of what kind of competencies are there, where they can be delivered. You don't have to be in a physical building to with a group of 20 people to get certain competencies. You can send trainers out to site, you can do them in community centres. We have to be realistic about putting all this in place. And I'd like to put that over to Amanda, because one of Amanda's jobs is she's got a role in one of the Mayor's construction academies, and she gets to see what gets delivered and what leads to jobs. And I don't want this to be a criticism of any organisation, but there is a plethora of information that full-time courses do not lead to jobs, and in the current climate we really have to make sure that stops as soon as possible. Amanda.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I think there's a number of college courses where students aren't equipped fully, as Paul was saying, with the relevant certification, so whether that's the SPS card or whatever, to then be able to work in the sector. And I think sometimes if students are going from, I'm talking young people here, from school to college, doing a trade course, they classed as full-time courses, but it's only 2 or 3 days. And I think sometimes the people might get into bad habits in terms of getting up in time, which then when they're trying to come into the sector doesn't help. So I think sort of short, sharp courses that are interactive. And some of the people, if we're looking at entry-level roles, some of the people that we want to come into the sector may have had bad experience at school. They may have a fear of going into a classroom, and that can put them off. So they may not be attracted to going to college to do a course. So if we can do courses that are more next to a site, so for example, the Skills Centre in Elephant Castle is right next to a Lend-Lease site. So it's more like a real site experience than a classroom. So it takes that fear element out of it. And actually, a lot of people don't want to sit in a classroom all day, 9 to 5 or whatever time the course might be. So getting them out into a yard, doing physical activities, that's the way to engage them. So that's my view of getting them engaged, getting employers to come in and talk to them, or people who are apprentices, so that they can hear what their experience is like. Also, sort of giving them some resilience training. It's something that Paul and I are working on at the moment, so that they are better equipped when they're in the workplace. If they come up against a hurdle, how do they deal with that hurdle, rather than just expecting them to know how to do it. So we're looking at, as I said, developing some resilience training that will help them overcome those barriers, so that they don't fall at the first hurdle. They know how to deal with situations. They know how to have the confidence to ask questions if they don't understand what they're being asked to do.
Thanks, Amanda. Jacqueline. Jacqueline.
We should all have a responsibility to offer work placement. I think it's very important that people get a taste of what it is like to work in the industry, even in a specific role. For a young person coming from school, they don't know what it feels like to work in that role. And if they choose to go to college and spend 2 years learning a trade but never go onto site, and then come away with a qualification but get on site and find out they hate it, that is a real waste of time, and it's very, very demoralising for that young person. And it's also a waste of government funding. So we really, really need to make sure that young people are able to access placements, so that they can have a real taste of what that role feels like. What is it like to work in construction? What is the industry like? And that will dispel some of the myths as well. And you know, that welcoming the diversity as well, rather than you know, the stereotyping of what it is to be in construction. So we run a Women in Construction course, probably similar to Amanda, and I always start that by saying, what does a woman in construction look like? And I get people to actually draw, as a team, a woman in construction, and she's always very big and muscly. And the key word that always comes up time and time again is that she has to be strong. So the perception is that, you know, you have to be big and strong to work in the industry, and obviously that is not the case. And so this is about, again, challenging those perceptions and giving people a real opportunity to come along and see for themselves before they commit to long-term training. And I do think there is real measure in having shorter courses that get people work ready, certainly around health and safety, the attitude, being able to get up for work, having professional behaviours, and then transferring that into a course that is very much employer-led with training provider support, so that that individual becomes well-rounded, and obviously that is an apprenticeship. But it would be nice if there were other programs and courses that people could do that were similar, but not necessarily, not all roles require a full apprenticeship either. So I think that model could be reflected in other programs that perhaps aren't apprenticeships.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Christina?
Thanks, Paul. Training for us, it is slightly different in the sense that there's not really a college course. There isn't a college course for traffic management. It is more on the job, sort of a mix of classroom and site-based and assessments and so on. There's a lot of barriers for us in this. So, you know, there's the Kickstart scheme, there's the apprenticeships, there's this, there's that, but it doesn't always naturally fit to traffic management. And I think that might be the same for other parts of the construction industry, that these schemes are available, but they just don't quite fit. So it's about working together as an industry to sort of break those barriers and make these schemes fit, and sort of lobby to get these things in place so that we can actually use them as employers, and get our teams skilled up, and increase our teams so we can continue the business growth. We can't train fast enough at the moment, and there's an awful lot of pressure on our experienced and skilled guys to be mentors for our newer employees, and you know, our more experienced guys might be great at traffic management, but they might be awful as mentors. So there's that element of skills and upskilling to help in that sense as well. So it's kind of multifaceted for us, really, this particular issue on training. You know, what are we doing to overcome it? Well, as Paul's mentioned, we are looking at doing a Kickstart scheme that'll be spread across a number of our locations, because we don't have 30 jobs in one location, unfortunately. We need to spread it across a few locations. We're going to keep working towards getting the national apprenticeship scheme. You know, there's all sorts of things that we can continue to do to help overcome these problems. I think it would be helpful if we did all collaborate, to use the lady's words from earlier, and work together as an industry to sort of say, you know, this is great that you're putting all the funding together, but actually it doesn't quite fit yet for what we need as employers. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Christina. Nigel, if you get anything to add to you?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because, you know, we're talking about rather different aspects of the construction industry here, but there are still things which run through it. So there are still, you know, in the same way that there are gender issues that Jackie was talking about on site, there are gender issues in practices, in consultancy, but they're probably more to do with the gender pay gap, really, and how career progression happens. But they're nonetheless issues that we need to address and deal with. Another issue that's occurred to me is that, and this is definitely across the whole construction industry, we sort of have two industries. We have the industry of quite large businesses. So, you know, for example, my practice, Hawkins Brown, is at the large end of architectural practices. with nearly 300 people. But the fact is that 75% of architectural practices are 10 or fewer people. They're really micro businesses, and that really affects what they can manage to do. So when we're saying take on apprentices and things like that, yes, absolutely, large businesses should have a requirement to do that, but the micro businesses really can't do that. And that runs across. So if you look at contractors as well, you know, you've got very large tier 1 contractors, but I don't know the percentages for construction, but I imagine that it's a similar sort of picture where the vast majority of construction businesses are micro businesses, you know, a sort of the classic man in a van type business, and they have completely different capabilities than the large, you know, tier 1s or sort of more significant parts of the supply chain. So when we're talking about skills gap, I think we've got to recognise that it's not just the large civils and the large sort of contracting businesses, it's actually the issues that run through the really micro businesses that make up a significant part of our industry, and we need to be addressing those as well. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I mean, it's certainly something that we have to address.
Yeah, I mean, Christina mentioned there, the Kickstart's based in groups of 30, and Christina's in a fortunate position that she can take 30 over 4 depots around the Midlands. But I mentioned the new course we've developed for gas operatives in the civil side, and the first groups are going to be Glasgow, Stirling, Newcastle, Tyneside, and sorry, Newcastle, North and South Tyneside, and County Durham. Now, there's probably going to be at least 25 contractors involved to make up that 120 people. Just as you said, Nigel, these are companies with 10 people, all people of a certain age, because there isn't a course that they can go and pick up these tickets out with the Kickstart. So, you know, that just mirrors what you just said about the architects, you know, that 3/4 of them are micro businesses. And if we don't get that whole supply chain engaged in these initiatives, you're just restricting yourself to satisfying maximum 25% of what's required. So, but because Kickstart is so simple, it's been a very easy conversation with those contractors to show them how it can benefit them and how relatively painless it is in terms of bureaucracy for them. So as I said, it's a brand new project, started in September. Less than 10% of the placements have been allocated so far, and it's been sort of household names: Tesco, Amazon. I think the biggest construction employer so far with Kickstart was Murphy's, who took on 52. Again, a £1 billion turnover company, so 52 people's realistic for them, given that they're in the civil sector, they've got a culture of direct employment. But that's why I think the time of this discussion is really good, because that money is available from the south coast of England to the north coast of Scotland, and looking at all the infrastructure projects out with the big centres of population, you know, you can get your civil engineering businesses in Anglia, Cumbria, etc., Grampian on board with this, which is why our order book for it already is very, very healthy, and that's without any sort of coordinated marketing campaign. This is just with conversations with people we already know. So that's why I'm really keen to get all your insights to this, because the money's now there. We don't have to say this is achievable, but there's no money to tackle it. The money's there. Let's keep this collaborative approach going, and I'm sure if we convene again next year, we'll have some impressive figures to put onto the next year's presentation. So thanks very much for that. Again, just to finish off with that, this is how relatively simple it is, you know, to get a lot of people into work. You know, if you get half a football pitch in size, with classrooms nearby, you can get 2,000 people a year into work. Divide the football park into 10 by 10 squares. So you get a group of people doing groundworks, a group of people doing steel fixing, etc., etc. Project compounds, we'll speak to a lot of the tier 1s on the smart motorways contracts to utilise those massive compounds they have. They've already got the classroom capacity with the porta cabins. give us an identified piece of land, and then we can start doing street works, EUSR tickets, etc. Just all the compliances these projects will need. Speak to local authorities about any derelict land they've got. Jacqueline has been great getting us a cricket pitch in Morden, where we've just finished a lot of training for Christina's company, using the pavilion as the classrooms. Next year, we hope to expand the provision so that we can actually do civils there as well. And then obviously, because it's a disused cricket pavilion, there's changing facilities in there. You've got female showers and toilets, you've got the kitchen, so you can do practical stuff, do the health and safety in the afternoon or vice versa, be cleaned up, get fed a good homemade bowl of macaroni or whatever. And the Graving Dock in Glasgow is another site. We know the developer there. It's a listed building, but it's a listed structure, sorry. It's more or less in the city centre. That tower you see in the first picture, that's the Glasgow Science Centre. So it's the south side of the River Clyde, very accessible by underground buses, just off the motorway as well. There's places like that all over the country, and again, that means because you've got access to these premises, you don't have to put the cost of premises onto the cost of the training. You can spend more money on the training as a result of getting access to free facilities, and that means you've got a more competent worker. So logistically, it isn't that difficult once you know what's going on in a particular area. And as I say, now the job centre funding is all about jobs. The political barriers we've had in the past seem to be disappearing, so we're looking to engage with that type of contractor up and down the country. Water, gas, 5G broadband, anything that's regulated, we can get entry-level people for them on a one-company basis if they're big enough to take on 30, if not on a spread across similar size subcontractors. Right, so Nigel, this is predominantly you, given the comments earlier on, and I think it ties into a wide range of skills issues. So you mentioned the increase in design and build, and some younger architects don't have the technical skills that the generation before them had as a result. And if you just give it, because some of the figures you gave us, we had a sort of warm-up chat about this, that only 7% of architectural graduates become architects. That's an astonishing, it's an astonishingly low progression rate, given it's such a specialised degree for a start. And I just, wondered if you think that a national apprenticeship programme for the sector could increase the retention rate of people coming into and improve the access rate of people getting into the industry, but also the skills levels if they're working closely with the manufacturers.
Yeah, so I think that 7% figure is people that start off at the beginning, when they're say 18 going to university, and the ones that actually end up finishing their professional exams, which is at least 7, but usually rather more years away from the starting point. And it doesn't mean to say that they're not staying in the industry. It just means that they're not finishing off and qualifying as an architect. And you have to do that to be able to call yourself an architect in the UK, because it's a protected title. So it might be that they're doing a degree, they're finishing a degree, and then deciding they want to do something else in construction. They might be becoming clients of construction projects, or they might be going into all sorts of other areas. So it's not to say that that we're losing all of those people, but certainly they're maybe not qualifying as architects. And even then, if you don't fully qualify, it doesn't mean to say that you can't do the work, because although the title of architect is protected, the function isn't. So a lot of people that perform architectural services, you mentioned technicians, Paul, earlier on, and of course we have really good quality technicians who are able to to deal with a lot of the technical work as well. But I think just on the topic of offsite, there are all sorts of reasons why I'm keen to advocate it. I mean, for a start, we have had flatlining productivity in our industry for a very long time now. And you may well have seen the graphs that the likes of McKinsey produce, showing how manufacturing and how productivity generally has gone up significantly over, say, the last 20 years or so, whereas the line for construction is pretty much flatlined. We're just not improving productivity. And I think that is a problem, because it means that we have tighter margins in the industry, and we know that, you know, the tier 1 contractors operate on something like 1% margins, which is just untenable. So we have large businesses like Carillion going out of business, and it's just not working. So we need to find a way around that. And if we can improve productivity, and if we can make deliver more value in the construction industry as a result of that, then hopefully there is more cash in the industry to be able to invest in a lot of the things that we're talking about now, and start to make it into a, you know, sort of virtuous circle, rather than the flatlining one. And I think that you know, we've had conversations about offsite for many years, and a lot of people are quite cynical and will say, oh, look, we've talked about this in the past, it's never really going to happen. But actually, I do think this is different. I think there is much greater sort of a build-up of behind this now. And in fact, you know, just talking from a training point of view, I think it's really interesting. The CITB, who of course traditionally are associated with trades, with training of tradespeople, last year have supported the development of skills for consultants working through the supply chain school, and I was very lucky to be able to be part of this. And the CITB have recognised that if we're going to have greater implementation of off-site in our projects, it really has to start at the beginning of the project, and that starts with the consultants, with the architects and other designers, because if we don't design our buildings in such a way that they can be constructed using modern methods, by the time we get to the technical design stage of the project, it's too late. You can't change what's been designed as a building to be constructed traditionally. You can't then efficiently make that into one using modern methods.
Yeah.
So the CITB has recognised this, and they've said, actually, we're going to provide training for consultants in understanding the basics of offsite, and I think that's a really valuable issue. So that's a sort of at the beginning of the project cycle, and then when we get into the sort of nitty-gritty of manufacturing and assembling it, of course, we're talking about the difficulty of attracting people, young people, into the industry. The sort of view of the construction industry as being as something of second choice. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. I think we've got increase in digital technology, and we've got increase in constructing off-site, both of which I think will allow us to attract a sort of more diverse and a broader group of people into the industry. So I think, so off-site for me, one thing, it can help us to get out of the doldrums in productivity and start to help us deliver more value and get that into the business. And as a sort of byproduct, but a really important one, it can help us it actually reduces the level of skills required, is a lower level of skills, which I think opens it up, but it also creates a more attractive work environment and provides for a more diverse workforce. So I think all in all, it happens that off-site, I think, can help us in all sorts of areas, and skills is one of them.
Thanks. No, there's some astonishing stuff. I mean, I think Balfour Beatty have targeted 25% of their output by 2025 to be off-site. And last year they wheeled in a 1,000-ton section of bridge onto the A14. It was completely manufactured off-site, and it just got wheeled in. There was a modular house put up in Birmingham last year, and it's cost the family £1.20 a day to heat, because it's so well insulated, because it's built in the factory. The only traditional part of the project was the groundworks. That manufacturer has now moved into a 70,000 square foot factory on the outskirts of Coventry. So, and you're right, people don't know about this sort of stuff. And it's creating a lot of
I think
jobs.
Yeah, I was going to say, housing. Yeah, sorry, Paul. I was going to say, we have this massive need for housing. We're supposed to be building 300,000 homes a year. We're building at the moment half of that, and so it's not improving. And that's partly because the existing supply chain can't cope. it just can't produce anymore. And frankly, the house builders don't want to build at a quicker rate because it doesn't suit their sales profile. So we need to introduce a new supply chain to that. And there are all sorts of other benefits that offsite can bring. Just saying, you know, you're probably getting better quality because it's being built in a controlled environment rather than in a sort of an open environment. So there are all sorts of other skills, other benefits of adopting this. And yes, it's definitely becoming more prevalent at the moment. I think it's only about 10% of housing uses some form of modern methods of construction, but yes, it's interesting that people like Balfour Beatty are committing to that, and there are other contractors as well. It doesn't have to be what we call now category 1, fully volumetric, where you're sort of craning in half a house or an apartment or so on at a time. There are all sorts of other ways that you can improve what we call pre-manufactured value, so the amount of the building that's developed built in the factory rather than and then assembled on site. And we need to adopt all of these, and they can all make a significant difference.
Thank you. Jacqueline, are you obviously United Living have got a huge order book. Is modular housing featuring in your internal discussions about your offer to housing associations, etc.?
In my knowledge, I have to say I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't work in the new home section. Potentially it could be, but I was just listening to Nigel and thinking actually that in itself opens up a load of new skills requirement as well.
Yeah.
So how's that being communicated? How are people finding out about those skills that are coming that will be needed in the future? How are training providers adapting to that? And I think there's a lot there around the communication. I was thinking earlier when you were talking about the multitude of the smaller employers, the one man, his van, you know, micro businesses. It's very difficult sometimes to actually find out what training is available. As a large organisation, we struggle. As Christina said, you know, searching for training and training providers can be quite difficult. So for somebody that is even further removed, I think it probably is something that puts people off supporting apprentices or putting people through training, because it just seems like a mountain to climb to actually find out what's available in the first place. And that's from the employer's side. So then from people looking into the industry to try to find out all those roles and diverse roles available, again, there's definitely some work there around communication. And I think that's our responsibility. And as social value, that's something we obviously commit to all the time in terms of offering careers advice and making sure that people are aware of roles in the industry. But I think it's something that the whole industry needs to get together and make sure that the communication is there. Thanks, Paul.
Can I add to that, Paul? I think that's a really important point, Jackie. And you know, there is a sense at the moment with, and again, I'm talking about architectural apprentices, but there is a sense that it's some respects an act of altruism, really, because it does take a commitment, and it's not, you know, it's not something which is going to add to the bottom line of the company. So commercially, it's not a good thing. You do it because you think it's the right thing. You want to support the industry and support the profession. But if we're going to make this more sustainable, it has to be opened out. It has to be made easier. It is, you know, it's only a business which has an HR department really that can navigate all of the form filling and all of that process. If you're a small business, you just don't have the headroom to do this. So we've got to make apprenticeship easier. The government has to support it in ways which it's not at the moment, to my mind. There is too much of a barrier to entry. Certainly, you know, I'm talking from the area that I know. I'm guessing it might be similar in other areas of the industry as well. But certainly, it's not a straightforward matter at the moment, and it should be, because it's the only way that we're going to change things.
Thanks, Nigel. Amanda, have you got anything to add to the offsite comments?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Nigel and Jackie have said, and I think that CITB have been doing some work and identifying what those new roles are and what training would be required for the offsite. But as you say, Jackie, we need greater publicity of that and promotion of that. I see offsite could be a real opportunity to attract a more diverse workforce. Because it's a factory setting, it's more stable, so you're not moving from one site to another after 6, 8, 12 months. So that could give more opportunities for people that want to just stay in their local area to work and have more flexibility on hours. So there might be different shifts, which could attract more women or other disadvantaged groups. So I see it as an opportunity, but there needs to be the volume of off-site work there to make it sustainable and to make it sustainable. So yeah, I see it as an opportunity, but we need to challenge some of the ways that we currently do things. And in relation to the number of micro businesses, small businesses, yes, I agree totally with what you're saying, and whether the larger companies, the tier ones, could offer some support to those micro businesses in terms of ploughing their way through the paperwork and the bureaucracy for apprenticeships or other training, then that should help. And I don't know, and Mayor's Construction Academy perspective in London, they are developing a London construction training directory, which would make it easier for employers and learners to find out what courses are available across London. So that is something that is currently in the pipeline.
Thank you. That's interesting comments again. Thanks to everybody. You get a free pass on that one, Christina. Right. Next theme is retaining people. A number of different comments have been mentioned. People doing 2 years study, thinking they've got a skill set, go on site for the first time, don't like it. They've wasted 2 years of public funding. They're disillusioned. Why did that situation come up? I've been on a lot of webinars like most people in the last few months, and some of the work getting done in terms of retention at the tier 1 level is fantastic. But as Nigel and other panelists have mentioned, that's a very exclusive part of the industry. So how can we get these good practices right through supply chain? And I keep emphasising this. I just think the fact that the level of engagement we've had so far with Kickstart in the micro and SME sector is a great beginning, and we just want to keep that dialogue going. Hopefully, keep the bureaucracy as painless as possible for the subbies so they can concentrate on passing their skills on. Because as Nigel said, if you've got an HR department, this sort of stuff is easy. But 90% of the industry don't have an HR department, so you can see where between 85 and 90% don't have an HR department, so you can see where external support has to be put in place, easy to use to achieve everything we're talking about. But anyway, back to retention. Jacqueline, you've got a huge supply chain and a lot of social value targets to hit as part of your work with local authorities and housing associations. How do United Living keep the people that you recruit to come into the industry? What would you say your secret is? Because you always seem to be, everybody I know from United Living is a very well contented individual. So there must be something right going on in there.
We are lucky. We do have a HR function. I think it's recognising that people that come into the organisation are invaluable. If you don't value the people that work, you will have a revolving door of people leaving, and to any company or business, that's a huge expense. The value of people that stay with you for a long time, it's it is invaluable, and they have so much skills and knowledge then to pass on to the new people that come into the industry. We have an apprenticeship scheme. Up until now, that apprenticeship has been quite focused on degree level apprentices, roles such as quantity surveyors, and they're all given mentors, and they learn on the job. We are, I know our HR team are looking at widening that offer into other roles. We are looking at Kickstart as well, and very much the message around Kickstart, and these individuals will be across the country. So although we have the HR function, we still need to make sure that the managers that these Kickstart candidates will be working with also have the skills to look after them, because they will need nurturing, and they will need training, and they will need mentoring, because this may be their first taste of work. So they will need a different approach. And so there's training for even our own staff on how to manage and mentor the Kickstart candidates. And it's very much being publicised as these people may only have a 6-month placement, but actually they could be the succession rate for our business.
Yeah.
So mentor them, nurture them, and bring them through, and hopefully, you know, a good percentage may then become full-time employees of United Living. But I think it's about, you know, every business has a responsibility to retain people once they join, and the only way you keep people in a business is by making them feel valued, and that they have a place in that business and potentially a progression route. But the worst possible scenario is they leave you, but if you train them well, then actually you have given something back to the industry. You're preparing people for other construction companies. And as we all know, there's a huge skill shortage. So if we're all doing our bit and people do leave us and move to other contractors, we can still have had a part in that. And the main thing is they've been retained in the industry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Right, Christina, you missed out the last one. And again, your questions, you know, some of your comments about not having a formal apprenticeship structure, despite your very impressive desire to have one, and you still managed to have a very good, loyal staff dotted around the country from the south coast up to Manchester and across to Stockton. So how do you do that, Christina?
Well, I echo what Jackie said, really. And obviously, as a HR professional, you'd expect this to be very close to my heart, and you know, valuing our people. That's embedded in everything that I do every day. So this is something that we really do put quite a lot of focus on and effort on it as a HR team through all the companies we work for. So it's, you know, Jackie's earlier point of the work placements and managing expectations of those coming through the door, looking after them when they're working for us, and also respecting those that do choose to leave. Sometimes when people choose to leave, it could be for any number of reasons, but respecting and managing that exit flow as well, because that might come back full circle, and we would want people to want to come back to us one day when, you know, when potentially their circumstances have changed, they want to. So it's the sort of the full employee life cycle, really, for me. And as Jackie mentioned, sort of companies that have the retention type issues, I think that needs to be an internal reflection first. So you would look in the mirror before you look out the window, sort of approach. You know, why are we losing people? What are we doing wrong? Are we doing anything wrong? All those kind of internal questions should be the first port of call for this kind of issue. But I think it's starting right at the beginning, as Jackie mentioned earlier, with, you know, managing expectations and work placements, and, you know, the job isn't right for everybody, and that's okay. And you know, managing that from the beginning, I think, is important.
Thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Paul.
So, Amanda, what's the sort of, you know, you work right across the industry, as well as doing the Mayor's Academy stuff. You also support the social value for a number of contractors. What kind of problems are they facing in terms of retention?
I think the construction sector isn't known for its flexible working, and I think more could be done on that. I mean, there are some companies that are doing some great work on that, and I think COVID this year has shown that people can work from home and be effective, and I'm really hoping that we retain that, maybe not to the same level that we are at the moment in lockdown, but that the industry recognises people can do roles working from home. They don't have to be on site or in the office every day. And that should be able to give greater flexibility for people that maybe have caring responsibilities, and so that should help the retention. I don't know the statistics, but there are quite a few women that leave the sector when they go to have children and don't then come back. So there's some companies, Balfour Beatty, Scant, that have retention scheme, returners schemes. So maybe we need more of those, which is for people that have had a career break, and helping them. Generally like a 12-week program, and it's helping them gain their confidence and going back into maybe not the same role, but a similar role to what they've done previously, and then the option of a permanent job at the end of it. So having those sorts of schemes, and being more inclusive on our sites. Some of our sites can be intimidating for women or disadvantaged groups. So being more open, more inclusive is what I would say.
Thanks, Amanda. What about retention within architecture? Nigel, do you see?
Yeah, well, it's I think the same for everyone, really. You want to retain, you want to attract and retain the best people. So, and we go to quite some lengths to do that. We take training very seriously, and I think it's recognizing that, yes, for one thing, you have to be competitive with the salaries that you're giving, and we certainly look at how we compare to our peers in that sense, and use data to make sure that we are competitive from that point of view. But I think for most people, that's really only one component, and they're looking for rather more. And there is a significant emphasis on what training you're being provided with, as well as the working environment. And, you know, and indeed other activities sort of outside of your work. You know, we're creative people, but you know, it's not just about learning how to design buildings. People are interested in other creative activities. So, you know, we organise evening classes for a range of things. But we also have a, you know, very focused training, ongoing training for which is related directly to what you're doing in the workplace. Architects are required, as part of your professional membership, to undertake a minimum of 35 hours of CPD, continuing professional development, each year. And so we, you know, and there's certain parts of those, there are sort of core subjects that you're supposed to maintain. And in fact, this is going to increase post, you know, following on from the Hackett review, post Grenfell and so on. There is a focus on competency. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about this sort of slight drop off in technical skills that seems to have occurred for a period of time. You know, we're not the only ones that need to do this. It is across the industry, but there is going to be the Architects Registration Board, which governs the protection of title, is consulting at the moment on this, and will be requiring and mandating. I think it's likely to be every 5 years to effectively to go through an examination process. So it's pretty serious stuff. You know, it's sort of upping into intensity. But this is, you know, this is needed. So you know, we've got to do this because, you know, things that have happened recently in our industry that are not acceptable, the loss of life and so on. So we've got to do it. So it's another aspect to the skills gap, but it's raising the game. So it's not just maintaining what we've got, but it's actually improving what we've got. And certainly, I think, you know, as an employer, Hawkins Brown recognises that's really important, because you want to retain people. As Jackie says, you know, it's really expensive to recruit, actually. So there's a commercial reason for wanting to do this, as well as just you know, a sort of social incentive, that it actually makes really good commercial sense to attract the best people that you can, and then to retain them, so they don't feel they have to move somewhere else to progress their career, that they have a way of doing that within the company. But I mean, I suppose finally on this, I'd say that again, just to reiterate, it is very different in a large business to a small one. They are completely different issues that individuals face. It is fundamentally different to be working in a, you know, a sort of, you know, I mean, we talk about SMEs being above 250 people, but, you know, in the construction industry, certainly in architecture, as I say, most businesses are much smaller, you know, 10 or fewer people. You do have a good number of architects that are employed in large businesses, but they are very different places to work. And I think large businesses will tend to be better at training. The small ones will probably do their best, but maybe just don't have the resources that the larger organisations have to be a bit more altruistic from that point of view.
Thank you very much, everyone. I've just had a prompt from Jackie to say there were questions. I've just opened the chat function. So please disregard what I said at the start, would answer questions all the way through. I've just noticed there are some. We'll go into them in a minute. So basically, we've covered a wide range of topics, hopefully found it informative from different perspectives of the industry. And, you know, hopefully you were very much focused on this is how we achieve it, not a list of complaints. And in terms of the first question that was sent in an hour ago about collaboration, this is just a snapshot of what's going on across the country. People work together. New City Vision, of the developer in Glasgow, giving us the dock for training. Network Scaffolding and TASIC have supported a project in HMP Edinburgh that we're looking to roll out across the country. United Living, Jackie has been great getting the cricket pavilion set up for us down in Morden. I've also met her colleagues in Sheffield who are due to setting up a similar facility. Amberon, again, benefited from United Living's generosity of setting up a relationship with the community organisation that owned the cricket pavilion so we could train people for them. A lot of specialist training providers there, nationwide platforms. We're developing entry-level courses for the rail sector with them. ESS Safe Force doing the water. Hayrod, who have got the CITB licence for groundworks, steel fixing and formwork apprenticeships. Class of Your Own, tied in with Amanda's resilience qualification. We're going to be delivering that Class of Your Own curriculum outside our school for the first time. Again, so we're blending that entry pathway. It's not just going to be tickets on Kickstart. They're going to get the resilience qualification and they're going to get the level 1 deck. So there is a lot of collaboration, and hopefully a platform like today makes people realise how easy it is. We're all trying to do the same thing. The Bannockburn project is based on using land at the back of a cricket club for the same purposes as a cricket club in Morden. Civils training backed up the classroom health and safety. So in terms of question one, yeah, please get in touch and we'll show you how you can collaborate with like-minded people. Question
Paul,
two.
can I come in on that? Sorry. I was just going to say, in terms of collaboration, I think the question mentioned about competitive industry, and yes, we are competitors, and I think sometimes the clients themselves make us more competitive because we're all set targets in terms of skills and employment. So even from the procurement downwards, it should encourage collaboration. And in terms of the cricket pitch that I'm able to offer for the training, that's a collaboration as well. And actually, that's an unlikely collaboration. So it's not even with other construction industry. I've had to look outside there, and that collaboration is between a football club, the National Trust, United Living, a college, South Thames College, and we've been able to bring together a range of different skills to offer to the community, so that they are able to access jobs in various different industries. So I know this is particularly around construction, but ultimately we have a responsibility to the whole community. And so that does open up wider opportunities, but that is why it's so important to collaborate.
Thank you, Jackie. Question 2, what advice do you have for training providers, brackets colleges, about the skills gap? How do you feel that candidates that have been through short training courses versus full NVQs? My thoughts are that the intensive ticket-based and behavioural safety-based interventions get people in, and the NVQ should come thereafter. An NVQ without any site experience or industry competencies as part of this demotivating young people, in particular, who spend 18 months, 2 years, whatever, thinking they're a bricklayer or a plumber or a, and it's I know it's a wider funding issue, but this is a perfect time to look at it, because this job centre funding covers 16 to 24-year-olds if the under 18s are on universal credit, and it's a far more attractive option because they're going to be earning a lot quicker and picking up these qualifications without having to take a financial hit. And then I can open that up to the panel as well. If anybody's getting
Can I come in there,
thoughts around that issue. Of course you can, Amanda.
Yeah, so I would say that I think training providers need to have close relationships with employers, construction employers, to know what's going on in the sector and what they require, and be more flexible in their approach in terms of the courses that they deliver. Some of them seem stuck in their ways of what they provide, and they may not be what the sector needs or wants. So it's having that employer engagement so that you understand where the sector's going, what are the future skills. We spoke about modern methods of construction. What are the training providers, colleges doing to train those people that we'll be needing in a few years' time? So it's forward looking at what are the skills that are required.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Next one, very relevant to a conversation I had yesterday. The armed forces is no longer a 22-year career. Young people sign on for 4 to 6 years, then they leave. They've been trained in resilience, meeting deadlines, learning and adapting to evolving situations. Should we be targeting this group who already have many transferable skills to be useful in our industry? And the answer is a resounding yes. But again, there's issues with the army resettlement offer for some of these young people who are getting NVQ level 3s without the appropriate experience, and it's trying to use that last 18 months of service to get them, you know, out of the army environment for a few months on site to get a taster. You know, I've dealt with a lot of army guys, and they've wasted their training money on oil or something because some providers made a sales pitch in their barracks, and it's useless. And it's £8,000. Some of them can access. It's got to be an open conversation about where the gaps are, what you're actually going to do. Another classic example is there's a lot of providers put infantry boys through plant. You're not going to get a job as a 360 driver after a 4-day training course. It's just not going to happen. So again, to utilise the funding that's there more effectively, we need to get communications come out in more or less every topic that we've discussed today. The more communication happens, easier for collaboration, easier for people to make informed decisions about their career choice. But absolutely, the army, you know, there's the amount of people I deal with in the industry who are from the army indicates it's very, you know, receptive to people from the services coming in. But again, you need to have a proper structure in place to allow that to happen. Anybody else get any thoughts about the military in particular?
I'll just add a short comment, Paul, that I know some companies do quite a lot with the armed forces. So there's Build Force, which helps ex-forces people get into construction. Balfour BT are very involved with it, with recruiting ex-offenders. and there's various different schemes out there that are good. It's just maybe we need to promote those schemes more, and do that. Yeah.
No problem. Right, 4 minutes left. Should you consider that STEM learning could help you set up the apprenticeship? Absolutely, which is why the partnership with Class of Your Own and the DEC curriculum is going to be crucial. I've been in 2 schools where that curriculum has been delivered, one in Edinburgh, one in Salford, and the figures are just off the scale. I mean, one of the kids in Salford, the Class of Your Own brought an engineer from Arup or somebody in to look at the projects they're working on, and they just walked past this girl's computer and said, "You're coming with me." And you just looked at the depth of research she'd done for what she was working on, and she became a structural engineer. A kid from a housing estate in Salford didn't know what a structural engineer was. She was in the shortlist for Apprenticeship of the Year. Goes back to her school as a 23-year-old, as a role model back to what we're talking about. I was you 7-8 years ago. Got her own flat. She's worked in Dubai, worked in Barcelona. Absolutely. And the key about DEC is you're getting functional skills into kids that we're looking to get the young offenders with, without calling it functional skills, because it's all project driven, and we can tweak the curriculum for niche sectors like Christina's, demolition, you name it. You've got a core of learning you need to do, then you're in a project mode, and that allied with the technical tickets is the way we're rolling everything out. The first time DEC's going to be delivered outside the school is a pilot project with NATO up in Newcastle, but as I say, with National Command, and I have a big meeting in the 9th actually. So absolutely yes, and the panel's got no time to answer that. The last question is Kickstart a good idea? It's been poorly designed. I don't think it's been poorly designed. I just think it's been launched and it'll be tweaked. They've already changed the payment schedule. The first payment schedule for subcontractors was 2 payments over 26 weeks, which has got a massive cash flow implication for a subby. They've already changed that to monthly in arrears, so it's getting better as it. We're spending £1,500 on technical training, which is obviously going to increase the retention rate throughout the 6 months, plus the DEC, plus the resilience. Recruiting young people through government-funded programmes is a minefield, correct? The collaborative approach, letting the subby pass on the skills with all the admin taken away, or the majority of admin taken away, is the key to making that happen. So Kickstart is something we're going to use the ease of access to make it extend into the apprenticeship programme. Question 7, does the industry advocate quantify the benefits of all-site VE? Oh, that's a technical question. We've only got 2 minutes left. We'll get back to you. Still a huge shortage of women in the industry. What can be done? We're setting targets of 30% females on the Kickstart programmes. One of the projects Christina and I worked on, there was 3 women out of the first 9. And again, once you get that percentage in, and then you get the role models, it makes it easier for people to come back. So I do apologise for completely ignoring what I said at the start. We would answer the questions as we went through, but I'm not very savvy with this kind of thing. It's 11:59. I'd like to thank the panel, and I'd like to thank the audience. In terms of the audience, any questions you've got, we're all on LinkedIn. I'm sure Oliver can also pass on our contact details. Let's hope this is the start of a big project, and we're doing this time next year with some phenomenal figures on the screen. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you to all of our panelists and to everyone who has joined us in the audience today. It was a very interesting discussion, and as we say, we've had lots of questions and comments coming through from the audience, which has been fantastic. An on-demand copy of the session from today will be available on the website, and all sessions are CPD accredited, so everyone in the audience will receive a CPD certificate within 1 month of today's session. Our next webinar of the series takes place today at 1 p.m. with a panel discussion looking at equality, diversity and inclusion in construction. So thank you everyone, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you all for our final session of the day. Thanks very much all.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.